So, welcome to another week and another edition of the podcast that is Life After Work. We're four ordinary blokes, all in our 50s, who happen not to be doing our principal job, get together each week and chew the cud on a subject that takes hours and hours of research and deliberation, literally about 5 minutes before we press record. Now, this week we were going to talk about Christmas, right? And then we sort of thought it's a bit early. So, what else is on our minds? And we sort of stumbled into the subject of, is today's society a little bit too sensitive around certain issues, and how do we deal with the issues of race, maybe even sexuality, that type of thing, and are we comfortable? Do we know where we're supposed to be treading the boundaries of and what the rules are, and actually who's in charge of those rules? Who says you can say this and who says you can't say that? Now, this is a subject that we're probably we're probably on the borderline not experts on, but we just thought, you know what, we gotta have a go at recording what we feel about this. So, gentlemen, in my bumbling summary, have I sort of teed this up? Has anybody got anything else they'd like to add in context setting?
I think you're right in what you're saying on it. It is an issue that needs approaching and sort of airing, really, because to be honest with you, there's a lot of naysayers out there that do you know what? I don't know where the rules come from of what is acceptable nowadays and what isn't acceptable. You just hear it, if you like, on the grapevine. Um, the way you can address certain people, certain religions, certain sexual persuasions. It's a minefield, and we're forever sort of treading on eggshells that we don't insult anybody or say the wrong thing. Now, me, I was brought up to 100% respect any culture or any persuasion of any description. That was it. My look in life, which I've brought on from my parents, is look, regardless of our color, our religion, our sex, whatever, we are human beings, and this is our planet. Now, we were talking off air, and Ash said that, I am, and I admit I am living in an ideal world, but to me, it shouldn't be about, do I call you this person or do I call you that? Do I describe you like this or describe you like this? Or do I just say, there's another human being that's exactly like me and living on this earth and we're breathing the same air? And again, what we were saying about affair, I don't think it's the majority of these particular groups. And when I say particular groups, I hate, do you know what, lads? I hate that label straight away, groups. I'm talking about the black people, the Asian people, the Chinese people, the gay and lesbian. I'm talking about everybody. I automatically, as a white heterosexual male, I've got this condition in my head to put them into a group. In my mind, they're not in a group. They are in a group. They're in my group. They're in the human being group. That's what they're in. But if that's the way we're going, and they want to, it seems to me that the minority of these groups are making the loudest noise in some sort of determined effort to stir up a pot of trouble and make everybody else, including the majority of the groups that they're currently in, angry and annoyed at what's being said and done. And this in itself is to, right, if we're going to put me into a group, like I say, I'm your heterosexual white male, and what it will do to a minority of my group is annoy the people in that group to an extent where they're going, they're always changing this, they're always changing that, they're always doing that. And this leads to riots and anger and more hatred, because the minority of what they've done, they've stirred the pot and stepped back. So your innocent blacks, your innocent Asians, your innocent Chinese, they're getting harangued and harassed and assaulted by the minority of my group because they're so pissed off with what's going on and they feel it's unfair. I don't know who starts these labels, but I think, do you know what? If I had a magic wand, I would wave it across the earth and go, "There's no labels anymore. What we are, ladies and gentlemen, we're all human beings, and that's how we're getting on with it."
So some of it is, I take your point, but just turn off one or pick up one aspect of it. As I think sometimes there's a name, a word used to describe a particular group, and it becomes derogatory because there are, or have been, well, and still are, genuine racists around. So once that word or term becomes seen as derogatory, as a norm, and that group or an individual within that group says, I don't really like that word anymore because it's become used as a derogatory thing, I think then there's an education process needs to go on. I think we've fallen into it ourselves, and we don't. I think the important thing is we know we're not genuinely racist. Therefore, if we're going to, we might fall into one of these, I'll say traps, just these pitfalls where you use a word that's no longer appropriate. And I don't have a problem with that, i.e. being told not really appropriate anymore. If I wasn't aware that it become derogatory, I'll move on. I'll say, fine, what you want, what term should I use? Not a problem, because I don't want to offend anybody. I'm more than happy moving on. I take your point, Paul. There could be some antagonistic stuff going on about where this stuff comes from, but equally, I think there's some words that become genuinely derogatory that an educated person keeping up to date with things needs to acknowledge that and stop using them. They shall remain nameless, but someone on the street I live on used an obviously derogatory word, and my wife picked that person up on it, and they said, "Oh, that's what they are, though, isn't it?" And they knew damn well that it was not appropriate anymore. So, and that's the worst type, when you know that it's derogatory, you know you're going to be causing offence. You are now doing that deliberately. That's more worrying when someone does it really deliberately.
Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, off air we were talking about various terms that, for example, I was talking about the BAME community, BAME community, and the first time I'd ever heard that, really, in all honesty, was with COVID. They're going on about how it was affecting various groups in different ways, you know, in terms of mortality, in terms of severity of illness. And they said BAME groups are disproportionately dying or disproportionately, becoming severely ill. And I thought, oh, I don't know, what's a BAME? I didn't know what that was. And I looked at it, it's Black, Asian, what is it? What's the M for? I can't remember now.
Mediterranean.
I don't know what it is.
Middle Eastern?
Middle Eastern, yeah.
Middle Eastern, and then ethnic or something like that.
No, it's Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups, isn't it?
Minority and ethnic. I mean, it's just, why, what is M? Why is the point of M? Because by default, you got Black, Asian, who are minority anyway. And then just to say it again, it's minority. And then you got ethnic. And then, it's just a crazy term. And when they say Asian, which Asian? Asia is a massive continent. Do they mean I was going to say India, Pakistan, China? Which one? It's just, which halfwit thought of that anyway? And it's just actually that. So in their, like you say, Paul, in their crazy attempt to be non-offensive, they suddenly have, in my eyes anyway, have become offensive. By trying to lumping anybody that's not white is basically BAME. And that's insulting in itself, isn't it? That's crazy.
Absolutely.
So I did find that, I found that really troublesome, and But then what you were saying, Phil.
But go on then, because I'm going to say, well, if there's a need, and maybe so there should be no need, but given what we said, there is genuine racism, and I'm not sure that there's meaningful racism, given that we are a predominantly white society in the UK still. Therefore, the most significant racism tends to happen against all those other groups. And when you're talking about that, saying, "Oh, there's a," what do you say then? Because
if you say something like ethnic minority,
right? Okay, yeah.
No, that's not. I like Paul was saying, or was it Rob was saying? Who decides this? I got no idea. I'm not. Whoever it is, we're not privy to that council meeting that happened where everyone is going to be suddenly, it's going to be called BAME or anything like that. If someone said ethnic minority,
do you think they started trying to list them? So, we've got a Black, and then there's Asian, which, as you say, is a bit of a vague catch. And then they thought, there's going to be ethnic. There's going to be too many of these. We'll just go for the rest. They might as well say Back the rest.
So just to put a slightly alternative view on this, right? As much as I think that this topic has become overly sensitized to the point where I think ordinary people, I've almost got tongue-tied and almost afraid to know what to say. So that sort of silences you a little bit. But the one thing I think that it does do is at least it has put the topic on the agenda and it's got people talking about it. So it's had to take maybe a more extreme point of view to get airtime, to get attention. But in doing that, at least now, I mean, the four of us are talking about this, right? So maybe it's had to be maybe overly slightly exaggerated, sensationalized, whatever, in order to force the media to take attention and do something with that. The danger I feel with it is that the language becomes too technical, becomes too difficult, that it actually alienates ordinary people from knowing what to say, and therefore actually puts the thing backwards again, you know.
And it alienates moreover, Rod, it actually, like Paul was saying, it actually alienates the people who are part of that community you're trying to define in the first place. So, so you've got the BAME community. I mean, that is just completely inaccurate. If you're going on about research in terms of people who were being adversely affected, it wasn't the BAME community, it was South Indian, and the blacks. I don't know if I can say that now. So, so they were the people who were mostly being affected by, in the first wave of the illnesses, where they were predominantly, especially the South Indians, they were getting, heart diseases, and then they were dying. It was just horrendous. So
I think you're right. There's an often laziness, and I think laziness. That's what it's laziness, rather than that was the distinction I was making before, or ignorance or laziness, as opposed to overt, deliberate racism. And I think the important thing is, I don't mind being told if I've made a mistake in the modern world. That's why I don't think we should get tongue-tied, as you say, Rod. I think the more important thing is that we keep talking, we keep expressing. The tone is important. And if somebody tells me I've just said something that really is not appropriate anymore, or if somebody's offended by it, then I'll learn from that. And I think that's the important thing, that we just keep that open-mindedness to it.
Yeah, you're right. We should, but you see, what gets to me is the fact that there are racists out there, and there are always going to be racists out there. It's an unfortunate factor of life. But I speak for me. I speak for all the people that I know. I speak for you guys. I'm sure that there isn't a racist bone within my body. There is not a racist bone in my body. Yes, in the 70s, I laughed at things like love thy neighbor. I probably laughed at that silly skit that we were talking about earlier, mind your language. I probably laughed at a lot of things that today would be inappropriate. It wasn't because I was thinking, oh, look at that stupid minority person. He's really, he's getting the pee taken out of him. It wasn't because of that. It was because of it was humorous. And that's all it was. Now you will get the people in today's society that will never ever forget those derogatory, horrible words like the N word, like the P word for everybody that's Asian. They will never ever get out of that mode because they are full of hate. Now my worry is, yes, like you, Phil, I don't mind being corrected and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'll do it as best I can. But I shouldn't have to be worried that I'm upsetting somebody by what I say if it's not derogatory. Whereas these arseholes, excuse me for using that, these arseholes who are racist, they don't give a toss about the new rules or the new targets. So it's the nicer, non-racist people that are getting weighed down with these new rules, where the real racists don't give a toss.
So that's what I'm saying. We shouldn't feel weighed down by them. Yeah, we're going to maybe make the odd mistake along the way, and I'm sure people will appreciate that, yeah, it comes from a place that isn't genuinely racist. I mean, we were talking earlier on, just to pick up your theme there of the comedy aspect. And my example, it was a Peter Sellers sketch, and it was based on an Indian character, and within it there was something funny, and I'd like to point out, I'm making the distinction between, there was the overall wrapper, which was basically Indian accent equals funny, which thank goodness we've moved on from that. I think we have anyway, with the idea of an accent being funny. We're so used to hearing, whereas in the 70s, it wasn't the case. There weren't as many about, they were new, they were different, and they were seen as funny per se. And that is racist in my book. So I think we've moved on from that. And it's just a shame that I can't find that sketch funny anymore because of that wrapper around it. It was, I think, that's the way I perceive it, that it was using the Indian accent as in itself as a source of comedy. But the other points within it, which I think are still legitimately funny and non-racist, they're gone because the whole thing's wrapped in something that isn't funny anymore.
We were talking about accents, weren't we? And I was saying that in my former job, I used to relate stories of some of the people I'd come across. And you can't relate that. I couldn't relate that story without, I hate to use the word mimicking, but without mimicking their accents. Now that, to me, it wasn't a derogatory thing to do. It was actually A, a mark of respect, and B, to actually relay the whole flavour
exactly
of the conversation. You couldn't do it in anything but in the language that I'd been, or the accent I'd been spoken.
And I think we all agreed, didn't we, on that, Paul, that's what we all think now, that it's, if you're relating something specific where it was the case, it's just a part of the story because that's how it was, and then it's done with that, bringing it to life. Then, but you're right, we probably, this is where this whole thing started, wasn't it? We probably feel very uncomfortable about doing that now.
It's like Rod was saying earlier, right? Back in the old days, if people did an Irish accent, like our good friend Rod is, you know, hi, look at me, I'm Irish, I'm take, and it was all derogatory. I could tell you a story about something Rod said over to me, a message, and do it it would only be funny if I did it in his language, because then you could relate to Rod and what he said to me and how funny it was when it came across. It's not derogatory, like I say, it's enhancing the comical moment that Rod gave me, and I can only hear it in his accent.
It's the context, isn't it? I mean, this whole thing started off because when Paul came on, I went, "Oh, sure to God, what about you?" You know, and that's how we started. And that's an Irish accent. I don't have an Irish accent. If anything, I have a Northern Irish accent, which is highly Anglicized. You know,
that's the other thing. You've got to be able to have the technical skills to do it, because I think it was actually an Irish comedian who picked it up on this, that when someone does an Irish accent, they start off County Cork or something, they end up, or they go through Dublin and they end up in Northern Ireland. You know, it's just
But that's how this whole thing started. Oh, sure to God, what about you? No, you know, and unfortunately, certain, I know, characteristics, certain languages get used, but it's
I'd use the line of duty thing. People, it's got all its buzzwords, hasn't it? Line of duty. Don't worry, no spoilers for anybody who still hasn't seen it, but it's your own fault, really, if it is anyway. But the Hastings character, and that his line where he says, "Joseph marrying the wee donkey." Now, if you did that, because it's specific to that program, that character, you've got to do it, otherwise it makes no sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, the thing is that I think there's a subtle difference now. I mean, actually, I don't even think it's subtle. If you go, I remember, you made me think there, Paul, because you're looking about Mind Your Language, because my parents watched it, and I'm pretty sure they did laugh. And there were parts of that which, however, if you look back at it, looking back on it now, you'll find that it wasn't. I don't know why they were laughing at that now, because there were parts of the comedy which were funny, admittedly, but then the major premise of the whole thing was a collection of foreigners who wanted to learn English, and they made mistakes, and it was their cultural issues that they were making fun of at that time. So if you watch it again now, it's
cringeworthy, probably.
It is, because
it's the same with remember 8.5 Hot One? You have the Bankawala, and he's there pulling the fan, and then the Jarwala doing all this, that, and the other. And again, they were browned up faces and all the rest of it. And then, see, if you watch all that now, And then see that hasn't dated very well. But the point I'm coming to now, but if you look at the Kumars, at number 32 or whatever, and they'll be doing their Indian accent. They've got the grandma who speaks. I bet you the actress who's playing the grandma doesn't have that thick Indian accent, but for the purpose of the narrative, she will. So exactly what you were just saying, for the purpose of getting that point across, they will say it and they will have an accent like that. And then suddenly now it's funny. It does make sense. And maybe it's because
context.
It's an Indian person saying it. I don't know.
Context is everything.
It is.
Context is
Totally.
absolutely everything.
Exactly.
And where it's coming from in the heart. It's
Absolutely.
coming from an Asian family. It's done with affection, remembering that.
And there's so many
character.
jokes when they're actually making jokes about the mums. They go, oh, the Indian mums, they'll always say, what have you bought that for? I could have made that for you, but they'll do it in an Indian accent. What you spent £4 for a sandwich for? I could have made that for you at home for nothing. And it's the classic thing, but you can imagine that with an Indian accent. And there's lots of Indian, but guess what? They translate really. Like they went to an Indian restaurant and they were saying, normally the joke is, they used to say, so pardon me if I'm going to offend anyone, but they say, "Oi, Gunga Din, come over here and serve." They said instead, they called the waiter, "Oi, John, come on, John," and they all started laughing at his name, saying, "John." And I go, "Give us the blandest thing you've got on the menu, the blandest thing you've got." And it was just a bit of reverse, and it becomes funny.
Yes.
At the end of the day, and it's not offensive, I don't think. So as you say, it is absolute context, isn't it? It's how you approach
it is,
that
and I think if we lose the ability to laugh at ourselves, we might as well give up. To be honest, as long as it's like you say, intelligent people that are out there in the world know the difference between having a go racially and having a bit of a crack, as the Irish guys would say, having a crack. Because that, those 2 points, whilst they are worlds apart from each other, we're in danger of there being a very fine line between the two, and that's what worries me. I would hate for someone to consider me a racist. It would really hurt. To be fair, because I try not to. Like I say, I don't live life through fear or favor. I do live in an ideal world. I'll be honest with you. I live in an ideal world. I want everybody to be able to walk into the same bar, eat at the same place, go to the same, do whatever, and do it all together. But
you need to be able to go into a bar along with the Englishman, the Welshman, the Scotsman, and the Irishman. Sorry, that's another joke, isn't it?
and you've got, there is banter. There's still, but God forbid we lose the banter and the funny outlooks in life. And I just feel that we're heading down this funnel and tunnel where the humor in life's being taken out, not because it doesn't exist, but for fear of actually sharing it. I don't know. Do you know what? I have seen films. I can't think of the titles. You guys may be able to think of the titles. I've seen, and I'm sure Eddie Murphy was in one, where they have, for the part of the role, they've worn white makeup. So they've made themselves look a white character. Now, I don't look at that and think that's racist. I think it's genius.
I was going to raise this question because I think I know where I stand on it, but I'd certainly appreciate your views and reflect on my own as well at the same time as to that whole notion of when both historical characters and also well-known fictional characters, can they be played by people of and if we're talking black versus white, if we're talking female, male, it's that whole thing. Is that acceptable? Is that okay?
So you mentioned James Bond, right?
Yeah, it's
and for me, there's no reason why James Bond couldn't be somebody of ethnicity, right? James Bond could be Irish, right? He started off as Scottish, and there's no reason why that couldn't be the case, because it's just a moment in time character, in my view.
So how far would you go then, Rod? What if James Bond's sexuality were to change, or if James Bond became Gemma Bond, 007?
That's a different character.
Ash raises a good point. It's what's intrinsic to the character, and I would actually argue but this is where I'm tentative, that if you know the backstory of Bond and he you know, he's where he comes from.
Well, from the books, if you're looking at the books themselves, he's a very, very specific character, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a, you know,
So,
he's a
so
white,
you are changing that character.
he's a white male. He's a very, very specific character.
As an author, personally, I think you cannot change the characters of any film that's based on a book. If the book is directly written for the protagonist to be a white Scottish guy, then in film versions, I think it should be a white Scottish guy that's playing.
If it's intrinsic to their character, and I think with Bond it is. There's a lot about his background and his upbringing.
Yes, exactly. And Phil, you mentioned Othello. You could never have a white guy playing Othello. It's not what Shakespeare said. It's not how he wrote it. There's a whole reason behind Othello, and the reason that it's a black guy, and
Right.
you couldn't change it.
So here we go then. So we're agreed, are we, that if we might not have agreed, but go with me on this then, that if we agree that the character has to be, as James Bond, it should be white character, and if it's Othello, it needs to be a black character. See, I don't think I would have an objection to a black or any other ethnic minority that looked the part, let's say, playing it, and I don't mind a white actor playing Othello if they're blacked up. Now that might be horrendous to some people's ears, because but why is it not
again right? I've got to back you up 100% here, not for any other reason, that I think that if right, let's say there's a role for the presence of a black person. Now we're talking Othello, we're talking Royal Shakespeare Company, we're talking very trained stage and theatre performers. If you can't get a black guy to play that particular, if there's nobody available, they're elsewhere doing something else, but you need to run this production, I don't see the difference between a girl playing Prince Charming in pantomime of Snow White, then there is a white guy putting on makeup for a role in Othello. There's no difference. It's actually getting into the character. That's what it's doing. It's not offensive. Othello wasn't white, he was a black guy. So if the only person they can find is a Shakespearean actor who will nail that role 100%, but it has to put black makeup on, why is that offensive? It's not offensive. Now, having said that, there's a thousand and millions of great black actors that could carry off that role. So
that's just what I was about to say to you, Paul.
We're talking hypothetically, aren't we? But if it came to the crunch, I don't think blacking up for the sake of blacking up and going, oh, look, like the black and white minstrels, look at me.
Oh, exactly. Again, it's the purpose behind it. If you're not doing it for comedy to make a derogatory statement, if you're doing it for authenticity, and that's your own
I think for authenticity reasons and for character, it should be acceptable.
But I think there's a real world.
If you're looking at authenticity, then the obvious thing would be to get a black actor.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And I think there's that real world.
For me personally, I think at the end of the day, the roles are the roles as they are. So if the role demands, as you say, Paul, in a book, which has to be if you do a book and it's a black character, it needs to be a black character. And not anyone blacked up or whited up or anything like that. It's a black character, full stop.
And I think there is a real world context there as well, that we've not got to forget that there is still genuine racism in preferential jobs. So why wouldn't you get a black actor to do it? That's I think in this day and age, I accept your hypothetical point, Paul.
Actors, who don't get jobs or anything like that, and then it's not going to be difficult to do that, to find an actor who's good enough and is actually black to play that role. So
do you know what's again quite the on the parallel of that, or on the opposite of that, is when Ben Kingsley played Gandhi, they couldn't find an Indian actor good enough to play Gandhi, so they had Ben Kingsley, and obviously he was coloured up to look in. And what a fantastic
good point.
Performance.
That's a really good point.
So it depends on the availability and the talent that's that. I don't think for something like a historical moving motion picture or a piece of theatre, that it should be. I don't think that the integrity of that should be jeopardized by. Let's flip the coin here. If you only had, here's a question for you going on that. Othello's up. There's a really bad black actor who's not very good, or a white guy that you know is fantastic, or you know, an Asian guy, Chinese guy who you know can nail that role and bring in the punches and really relay Shakespeare's work. Who would you choose? Would you go for the not very good black actor or the white Chinese, whatever other ethnicity actor? You see, because in my mind, yes, it should always be. And again, this is hypothetical because there are a plethora of black actors that could pull off Othello with such ease. It's unbelievable. But hypothetically, would you ruin the integrity of that story by using somebody who's bad at the job?
Well, this is exactly it. I mean, the question is, who's the best at the job? Right, and it should always. This is where I used to really struggle with work and recruitment, where people were trying to level up, as they like to say these days. You know, and you basically ask the question: who out of this group of people are the best for the job? And in acting, does it make you better that you are of the same ethnicity as the character is intended to be, or is it the person who can deliver the lines in the way that actually grips the audience and engages them, regardless of how they look? And it's the same thing, I think, today for any profession. Who's the best at doing that job? And that's where I think society has lost actually a grip. We're so intent on leveling up and all these type of things. We're forgetting the fundamental thing, which is I want the best person to do who.
I mean, going back to what you were saying there, then, Rod. In that case, I'd like to think in this day and age we would be able to find an actor who is black and is a very, very good actor. So
Exactly.
I know it's a hypothetical thing you were going on about. I know that was the point. But the point is that I think in all, cultures now, you are going to get people at the very top of their game who are of all backgrounds, who are of all colours. And if you wanted an actor to play in a certain role, I think you'll have no problem at all.
I think more so nowadays, actually, to be fair with you, because it was, again, was it not, in the Hollywoods of the 20s and 30s, predominantly, apart from Sammy Davis Jr., it was predominantly white actors and actresses. So there weren't a great many ethnic actors, if you like. But you look at today's society, you look at like the Idris Elbas. Idris Elba could pull off any character he wanted to, because I've seen him in so many different series, in feature films, and in each and everything of what he is so believable in the roles that he plays. Now that guy has got his craft down to a T, absolute spot on. And I'm pleased to see, you will notice that there are quite a number of ethnic actors rising to the surface now. I'll give you an example of the young lad who was in Slumdog Millionaire, the guy who played Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody. All these are really, really rising to the top of directors' go-to actors. And I think it's great that we're finally getting, I don't think, up until the 70s, maybe early 80s, we had enough diversity to fish from, if you like, to fill these roles that were going on. Nowadays, I think we've got an absolute abundance.
Well, we know. Yeah, you're right, because I mean, any black actor during the 50s or the 60s were called trailblazers. Like Sidney Poitier. Who's coming to dinner, and he was in that film with Tony Curtis when they were prisoners joined together, and they were trailblazers, and they set the scene for people to come now. If you look at I don't know, Samuel Jackson, Lawrence Fishburne, Earl Jones. There's just so many now. Even now, the guy what's the chap who tragically died recently? He was in the Marvel comics, Marvel's Black Panther.
Spider-Man.
No, the actor who played. What's his name? Was it Chadwick? Somebody? Chadwick.
Yes, Chadwick
Boseman. They were fantastic Oscar winners. So there are amazing actors. So nowadays, if a book, like you say, Paul, if you've gone to the effort of sweating over a character, and they are specifically just so, they need to be made just so when the film comes out. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think there's any way you can change from that. So going to that, this is going to be controversial now for me. When James Bond comes out, for me, James Bond, when Fleming wrote his books, he was done in a very specific way. Sherlock Holmes is in a very specific way. That's it.
I agree. But again, this might be spoiler territory for those who haven't seen the Bond film. And there's a bit more recent, I'll tread a bit more carefully, but it doesn't give the whole thing away. But I think they've treated that beautifully and brilliant irony with about, could you have a female James Bond?
Yeah, absolutely.
And our answer is no, but you could have a female 007, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Actually,
you should have gone to see it if you're that interested.
There would be 008, wouldn't they? Because 006, as we know, was Sean Bean, who hadn't actually died.
So, well, I don't know. Is that, have they made an error there in terms of numbering convention there? If an agent dies,
well, no, 007 in the book was just basically just the designation. So the incarnation of that 007 would always change. So
is it like the number 7 shirt at Old Trafford that if it gets vacated, somebody else can take that shirt on?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, on the subject we were on before with actors, and we've got to be careful that we still don't have certain associations that are maybe questionable. And I used the example a few years ago of the Da Vinci Code. And do you remember one of the villains in that? And it was an albino character.
Yes.
And there was no doubt about it that they were chosen to be albino because it was scary or horrific or so.
Yeah, that's true.
Are we not into territory there where we've got to question that as well these days? Is that not a caricature, a stereotype of a negative?
Well, I mean, it depends how far you go back. If you look at some of Enid Blyton's books, you're talking about something out of its time. They are absolutely toe curling. If you read any of the stuff now, like Noddy and this thing, I'm not even going to go into it really, to be honest with you. Do your own research.
Are you just against people with big ears?
I wish that was the worst of it.
I haven't read them, to be honest.
Why did you look at me then, Bill?
What's are they bad? I haven't read them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've been sanitized. Let's put it that way. They've had to be really, yeah. So if you look at, and it's, if you look at, for example, Gone with the Wind, there's a disclaimer at the bottom there. This does not represent the modern society as we know now. If you look at Walt Disney, if you look at, there'll be disclaimers on that. That's what they're doing now, isn't it?
It's as somebody quite famous said, and forgive me if I got this wrong. I think it was something like Morgan Freeman or somebody like that. That regardless of today's generation, people have to remember that this planet has a history, and that history will never go away. We have to remember and respect that history.
And learn from it
to where
absolutely.
Yeah.
So to deny that, he was going on particularly, I think, about slavery and this inherent thing to try and put say that, sort of dismiss slavery and put it to the back burner and forget. Black American history is built on that era. So the Black Americans and every American and every human being should look back on that time and go, that was a really crap time, but look how strong they've come out, and we've all developed, and put that on the back burner. But it should never be forgotten. Things like the Holocaust should never be forgotten.
No.
Horrible, horrific times, like slavery was horrible and horrific times. But these are the things, these are the foundations that are built a stronger stronger communities and stronger people.
Well,
and
it's how a
ju-
society improves, isn't it? That's what
yeah,
it's
it is.
the building block.
Exactly. It is exactly. I still think there's certain states in America that need to drag themselves out of those 1800s. They really do. You know, and they are still making waves and still look down on black people.
You know, and remember you were talking about societies. I don't know what it's like. I mean, each society. I mean, if you look up, you know. This is going to be controversial now as well. So if you look at Indians and if you look at Pakistanis, if you look at our parents and things, you know, at the end of the day, they've got attitudes which, if you know, are not applicable to modern society now. They've got to move on as well. It's not just, you know, the white community that got things that, you know, baggage that they have to get rid of. They have as well in lots of ways.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm sure racism in some forms is not a purely.
No, it's not just.
It's obviously in this country. That's its main root. But no, I'm sure it's not the sole preserve of white people.
No, of course, no. It's all over the world, isn't it? I mean, it's known factually how India and Pakistani people hate each other. Absolutely hate each other, and for no reason. Like I said before, the Palestinians and the Israel hate each other over what? A piece of land, gentlemen. Called
it's like that. It's like that.
It's
the world.
It's a dumping ground. It's crap, and they always fight over that piece. Here's one. Put a piece of tape down the middle of it. That bit's yours and that bit's ours. Now let's shake hands and get on with life.
No, but it's like Rod's going to tell you about Protestants and Catholics as well, Hindus and Muslims and this, that, and the other. You know, my best friend. I'm actually telling you the truth. But my best friend Asif, he's in Canada now. He's Pakistani, and you know, we never ever fall out about anything. So, there's always, you know, because like as you said, I think you said basically you started the whole piece off, Paul. You said. The common ground we've got is our humanity. I know it's a cliche, but we have, and that goes beyond anything. Goes beyond anything. And you know, if the sooner a lot of more people remember that, you know, as you say, you know, if they just remember that, what is it you're actually fighting for? What is it?
And I think this harks back to one of our previous episodes where the world, the globe is such a small place and such an interconnected place now that our mutual survival depends very much on our ability to get on with each other.
Yeah, it most certainly does. The only thing I will say, which annoys me, and I love the fact that people have their religion and there's various gods that people worship and go to. But what I don't want to see is people who follow a certain god or religion trying to force that belief onto people of a different religion.
Yeah.
You know, have your religion, great, but don't try and force it on someone. And then it gets to the point in some of these countries, for example, Afghanistan, if you don't like our laws and our religion, we're going to shoot you and you're going to get beheaded or you're going to die. Why? What God, whichever God has said they don't like your religion or your beliefs, kill them. No God has ever said that. No God has ever said that.
Well, it's all proselytizing, isn't it? At the end of the day.
And that's what annoys me, the fact that people want to push their religion and to the extremes. If people aren't listening to that, they're going to get killed.
But you know, it's content. At the most of the time, they don't go for that. Aren't we thankful for the vast majority of people aren't like that though?
Well, yes. You know, I think my dad used to say two things to me when it came to religion and stuff like that. He said that the land and people's desire to have land is the cause of most conflicts in the world.
Yeah,
and actually, religion, despite its intentions, can often be the thing that actually makes people, communities, more divided.
Yeah,
because of the tag of religion, and you sort of think that's not its intention, but that's what it does because it puts people into groups, holes, and people always seem to want to put others into boxes and be able to say that's where you are. If anything, we should have learned about things over this last even 18 months, is we're all on it together. It doesn't really matter
Absolutely.
about creed, anything else like that. You know, when it comes down to it, we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how well off you are. It's ultimately that's it. So, you know, I have to say, I do. Sometimes I think this is me checking out, but I do think, you know, live and let live. You know, if as long as your intent is good, as long as you're not out to hurt anybody, as long as you're not out to cause anybody offense, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't. That's the only thing to me that actually matters, is if your intentions are good, then that's all right. We can all get on together, because we've learned more about how small this world is, and we're sharing a resource that's only going to go one way, you know. So we've got to sort of get on, you know. And so I know the problem with it is each generation will point at something that you say you do, and they will say, that's a bit questionable. My kids have done it. I did it. I thought that of my own parent, or my dad particularly, and it was never intended to be, you know, hurtful or racist or anything else like that. It was just that's what they grew up around.
Well, but like Phil was saying earlier, he said, but at the end of the day, you know, as long as we can hold our hands up and say, mea culpa, if you learn anything and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, I won't, I have learned something now.
And the issue with today's society, I feel, is that they don't allow you that moment to put your hand up and go, oh, sorry.
No.
The moment you say
you get vilified immediately. That is it. That's so true, Rod. That's
and that is the problem. You're not allowed to make a mistake,
no.
Right? Because every mistake then is amplified and it's exaggerated, etc. And actually, you sometimes think, what are you trying to do there? What you're doing is it's a dictatorship. It's a sort of dictatorship in social media, is that unless I get it right first time, I'm going to be castigated, you know, and that's the danger, is that in an attempt to do the right thing, people are going to take the topic into the shadows, if you like, you know. But then I think I look at it a different way. I think, right, at least we're having a conversation about it. At least the four of us are having a conversation about it, even though it may not be the most representative group. You know, I still probably come from, if I wanted to, I could say I come from a minority. You know, I'm an Ulster Protestant, and I'm in the minority. You know, and I'll be tagged as being Irish and whatever else. You know, and I'm not. I'm actually Northern Irish, and I'm a different group. So, but anyway, so I think, you know, the way I look at this is we've come, I think, a long way. We have to be careful that minorities don't, the tail doesn't wag the dog so much that it distorts where people are, and it distorts the progress that's been made on the subject, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even think it's like the tail wagging the dog. It's, I don't know who was just made a comment saying that we don't know who's making these acronyms up. We don't know who's making these politically correct statements, and that who did this. I don't know who it was. Was there a council meeting that we all missed?
Absolutely. You know what, Ash, you're absolutely right. It's amazing. It's like somebody with access to manipulated algorithms on Facebook, or somebody is planting this little seed, and before you know it, it's grown. And this person's taken a step back. But
that is why we shouldn't get, that's why we should defuse this idea that the names and the words and the tags are the key thing. They're not really. It's the intention, it's the context, it's where the heart's coming from. Are you trying to offend? Are you not? Do you have an understanding of what it's like to be a minority? You know, are you sensitive to some of those real issues that are there or not? Those are the key things.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I think, do you know what's really good? Yes, there's only four of us, and we're certainly not a majority voice, but from small seeds, I'm hoping somebody picks up on this, and I'm hoping that, yes, people more powerful and bigger than us from this and other nations can actually get together and expand on what we said and go, hang on, it's all about context, it's all about intent, and sort of try and halt this ridiculous intentional flaring up of emotions that somebody, I don't know, we said it, we don't know who's doing it, nobody knows who's doing it. The fact that you can't say blackboard anymore or have a black cup of tea, it's total bollocks.
I sometimes think those are ironically suggested as
but somebody's planting these seeds somewhere.
Paul, I remember in Gores Hill in Stretford, I mean, when I was about 12, 14, something like that, early teenager, and there was a thing in the evening news going on about saying that, you know, taxi drivers aren't allowed to have the Union Jack, you know, when it was St. George's Day or something, or was it the, not St. George's Day, there was this particular, you weren't allowed Union Jack on a taxi or something, because it would inflame situations with the ethnic minority. Then it got all out of hand, how dare they, and this and the other. And, you know, a lot of them, you know, people just raising the point saying that, we didn't say that. The ethnic minorities never mentioned anything about Union Jack inflaming any emotions or anything like that. No one even bloody mentioned it. No one even, suddenly it just came out of nowhere. Some Johnny do-gooder in the council basically thought, oh, we better not do this in case it, you know, pees them off. Did you ask them?
Well, and that was absolutely the right thing to do, to say no. The Union flag is not about racism. But there was a time. You've got to remember that there was a time when it was sort of trying to be hijacked by the right wing as a symbol. So it's quite right that you shouldn't stop using it. Of course not. But you should be very clear to say this is not a symbol of.
Well, do you know what? It's an attempt to reclaim it, isn't it? If anything, exactly, and that's a good way of doing it now. Do you remember the St. George's Cross? That was you know, it was more of a symbol of, you know, of you know, like football hooliganism, and that's been massively reclaimed now. You'll see little kids now at England games of all ethnic denominations, all there basically with their faces painted, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely fantastic, because one thing you can say is that under that banner of the Union Jack is basically all ethnic minorities, you know, and they're, you know, all colours, white, black, yellow, doesn't matter. We're all British.
Exactly. It doesn't say and
we're all humans.
And we're all humans.
Well, some of us.
Exactly. It doesn't say, does it not? This is our union. This represents Britain. It hasn't got at the bottom, oh, actually, this doesn't include blacks, Chinese, Asian people. It's just the white British. It doesn't say that.
It's not mutually exclusive. I am Indian and I am British, and I'm absolutely proud of both.
And we're proud of you.
It's good to tackle the big issues anyway, isn't it? It's
no doubt.
I'm glad we took this one on. Next week, our chocolate bar's getting smaller.
without a shadow of a doubt. Yes, the size is going down, but the price is rocketing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Ooh, right, I'm gonna go and get some black 70% cocoa chocolate now, because
you see that's just too powerful.
I know.
I get 90%, Paul. I get 90%. I only have 2 chunks.
You only need the 2.
You only need 2.
Do you know the thing is, I because my energy levels have been low on this podcast today. I just had a time when I just drop, and I've just dropped, so apologies for that. But then I take a little bit of that, and apparently it's very, very good for the old brain cells.
Oh yes,
90% chocolate. Yeah,
massive antioxidants, and
as is an afternoon nap.
Well, and that's the thing, Phil. I'm not very good at it. I don't give into naps very easily. I feel very old when I give into a nap, but a power nap is probably a good thing. So my apologies for my low energy levels, and
you're just observing, weren't you, Rod, to be moderator in case we tried it in certain areas where we should.
You know what we should have shouted? We should have shouted
in your editorial.
Curly Whirly. Where?
Yeah, well, there you go. Right, well, look, that's good, lads. That's good. So same time next week, we will be back as another installment of the podcast Life After Work. And if anybody's listening to this and you have a topic you think we should actually take on or discuss, then get in contact with us at Radio Alti or Altering Community Media. We'd love to hear from you. We will take it on. So we're going to have our Christmas editions coming up very soon. We're planning for Christmas, just like the big man himself. So you'll be seeing some Christmas editions coming very soon to this podcast. That's it.
Fantastic. Have a great week, guys.
You too.
See you guys.
Over and out.